Hi, welcome to the training webinar for today. I'm Dale Franks, and this week we're going to talk about business values. Now, for most of what we're going to do, we're actually going to look at an application that is applying business values in various ways on both the form and on the process timeline. I am, however, going to spend the first couple of minutes at least quickly going through the configuration settings that are available for you in a business value, and then we'll get into more detail about how the business values can be used by looking at our application. So with all that in mind, let's start by just looking at a business value itself and how it's configured. So when you first create a business value, and I just created this a moment ago, so the only thing that we have skipped past here is naming the business value. But we're going to go through really the two tabs that are important to know about this business value. On the Properties tab, you have your name up here, and of course you can set your icon if you want. The important stuff starts right here with Group and Value Picker. When you're building a business rule, you may build a lot of business rules. In fact, we expect you to build a lot of business rules, and that's great, except they are hard to organize. So whenever you're trying to select a business rule in a condition somewhere on a form or a process timeline, it can sometimes be a little difficult to find the business rules that you want. So the Group and Value Picker property enables you to specify a menu group under which that business rule will appear. And I suppose I should probably show you that. So let me just go to, I guess a timeline is fine. Any place where I can set a condition. I really don't want to mess this up though, so maybe I should go to the form, and we'll just grab this click to create condition here. And when I add the condition, the first thing it's going to want to do is have me configure the condition, obviously. So we're in the condition builder right now to build our condition. And when I click on this button here, it will open up the Choose System Variable dialog box. This is a menu-driven dialog box that enables you to select all of the different variables that are available to you in the context of what you're doing. So the contents that you see here will change depending on what you're doing. In certain objects, there are some variables that simply don't apply to that object, and so therefore you would never see some of these menu items. In a situation like this on a form where I'm just sort of setting a generic condition, I kind of get the full list of items that I can access on the system. When we go to business rules, well, I've got a lot of business rules on the system, so much so that it's difficult to actually see them all in the menu because I have many business rules on the system. What that Group and Value Picker does is it enables you to select or to type in an item that you want to show up as a menu. So in the case of the business rules that we're using today, I've set the Group and Value Picker to be our training. And when it's set to be our training, then I can just go to this be our training item, and all 8 of the business rules that I have configured for today will all show up as one of the, one of the selectable business rules that I can pick out of the condition builder. So if you go down here and some of these only have one business rule in them, I have a large number of business rules that I have not assigned to a group in the picker. So therefore they don't show up as menu items. The ones that do, I'll have the little expansion caret right there on the right-hand side of the menu when it's open. But none of these are grouped in a value group, and so therefore they just appear as individual business values. The reason why these groups are so important, as my setup here demonstrates, is that it then becomes extremely difficult to go through and find business rules once you get 100 plus on your system. So that group and value picker is kind of an important property. And do as I say, not as I do. Find some method of organization for your business rules so that you can set up this group and value picker properly so you just don't have a whole list of business values that are not grouped. It will make your life better if you use group and value picker. The form, workflow, and timeline associated with business rule are useful if you have a specific form or process that you want to associate with the business rule. Association enables you to read all of the properties that are publicly available for that object. So if you associate a form with a business rule, then you can just automatically read all of the form fields and retrieve their values right directly from the condition builder because they are associated with the object. It's easiest if you do set a form, workflow, or timeline associated with the business value to go ahead and update that business value. Be sure that it's saved after you make your selection of one of these three properties so that when you go to the next tab, those properties are going to be available to you. Business rules can be local or global. And so when we talk about a local business rule, what we're talking about is a business rule that you have associated with a specific form or with a specific process. One of the things that that association does is it locks that business rule basically into the application where that form resides. So you generally can't use such a business rule outside the context of that application. Global business rules generally do not use any of these associations. Why is this important? It defines the scope of where you can use the business rule and also suggests where you should store it. So if I am going to associate a form or workflow with a specific business rule, which I have done with most of these business rules that we're going to look at today, those become local business rules. It doesn't make sense to store them outside of the application. So if I go to my business rules application folder and I look at that, I've got these business rules right here. Now, the reason these business rules are here is they're not all local business rules, but most of them are. Most of them just use the form to conveniently grab form fields and to use the value that gets returned to do other things. But if you are not going to associate a business rule with a specific form, and this parameterized one is a perfect example of that. It's not associated with a business, with any sort of process director object directly. In fact, all it does, and we'll explain this a little bit later, all it does is it accepts a parameter called value. And then based on whatever that parameter is, it's going to return, in this case, the first value that matches whatever condition I have set up. All of my conditions read the parameter value. So in this case, if the parameter value contains hi, it will return, well, hello yourself. And if it contains by, it returns that. And if it is blank, it returns no data in text. That's not a programmatic thing. That's the actual text it returns, no data. And then if I have any other content, so I can type gibberish, I can type something that does not, anything that does not contain hi or by or is not blank is going to return what as the query whenever this business rule runs. Because this is a parameterized business rule, and because it is not associated with any form or process, this becomes a global business rule. Now, in this case, it's stored with the application because if you were to ask me to export the business rules application for you so that you can see how it works, Everything needs to be contained in the export, and so it has to be stored with the application. But normally, for a global business rule, our recommendation is that you not do that. If you have a business rule that can be accessed globally, and in general, any business rule that does not have one of these three properties set is most likely a global business rule. In that case, what you would probably want to do is go to your system folders, which are those folders that have square brackets in the name, and you'll want to store those global variables here. So I have a couple of global variables. For example, this VP of operations simply returns the name of whoever the VP of operations is. So if I want to assign users to a task, like we'll see in a moment, I can just have a business rule that returns a user. There is no condition here. There is no association with a form or timeline. All this business rule does is it runs and it will return Barb Stanley, the Barb Stanley user object, to whatever queries this business rule. Now, this is very useful. For example, if I want to have a lot of things assigned to Barb Stanley, I don't want to assign things to Barb directly. We always recommend that task assignment be done either by group or by business rule. This is a great use for that business rule. Anytime that I need to go in and replace Barb Stanley, if all of my user tasks assign a task to a business rule, VP operations in this case, then if Barb Stanley gets replaced, all I have to do is come to this business rule, replace Barb Stanley with another user, and I don't have to go in and edit any of the processes that use Barb as a user. So I have several of these sort of global business rules. And in general, they're either parameterized or they are using a global system variable, like current user or current date or something like that. One of the things about associating a business rule with a process timeline is, or a form, is that, as I said previously, all of the sort of configuration, well, not configuration options, but all of the values that are associated with, let's say, a form, like form fields, those all become usable directly in a condition because we have that association. Now, I don't necessarily have to do that because I can always parameterize a business rule. So in this case, I have a very similar business rule to the one we just looked at, which is parameterized. I have a parameter called stuff, and all the conditions use the parameter as the testing condition. So in this case, I have, parameter stuff contains, and I have, hello, and I have by as the parameters. And so basically, as long as I can pass that parameter from a form or from a process timeline, this business rule will return the appropriate value. So I can take a business rule that is associated directly with a form, for example, and I can convert it to a parameterized business rule, and I can just pass a parameter to it, and we'll take a look at how we do that in a few. Moving beyond the Properties tab, we get to the Values tab. If you want to add a parameter, it's really simple. All you have to do is click the Add Parameter button and give it a name. And then you can pass a parameter to a business rule just as you do to a business value, simply by sending the parameter to it. We don't have a parameter for this one, but we do have parameterized business rules that we'll look at as we saw previously in just a minute. A business rule can return a couple of things. First of all, it can return a value, and that is generally a true or false value based, result of condition is what I'm looking for. Result of condition will return a true or false value based on the execution of a condition. In fact, that is the default result. A lot of business rules return true or false based on a condition. All you have to do is create the condition, whatever condition you want to create, as long as it's an evaluable condition. You can set it up so that the business rule will return true or false. That's very useful for binary decision making. It's all cool, but we really get into interesting stuff is our ability to return values. Now, when you set value, you basically can pick a value to return. It can also be a manual value. You can set a manual string to return, and all you have to do is set a condition as to when you want to return that value, whether it's a string or whether it is any of the global system values like current user or whatever, you can always return, but you can only return one. So this is it. I get the choice of returning a thing, and that is the thing I can return. So I can return the finance group. Okay, it's going to return that group object anytime it's queried, as long as my condition equals true. So you have the ability to set up a condition, as you will for all of the possible values that a business rule can return. As long as the condition is true, it will return, in this case, finance, but it can only return one value. So I have some other options. I have first value matching condition, where I can actually have multiple values, and each value would presumably have a condition. And when the business rule runs, it will start at the very top of the list. We'll check that condition. And if that condition is false, it will fall to the second condition from top to bottom. And if that condition is true, it will then return that value, and it will stop evaluating at that point. If two or more conditions would evaluate as true, it is going to return the first condition that reads true, and then it's going to stop evaluating. So even if there are two other conditions that would be true if evaluated, they simply won't get evaluated after the first one returns true. So what if I do want to return all of them? Well, I can return a list of values. And when I return a list of values, basically it will return a comma-separated list of every one of these values that we've set up for each condition that returns true. So if three of these conditions would return true, then it would return a comma-separated list of three values. And it works very similar for users. I can return the first user matching a condition, but when you set it to users, I can only return a user. I can't return anything else. But I can return either the first user matching a condition, or as we saw previously, I can return a list of users. So every user that matched the condition would be returned. And I can do the same thing with groups. I can have first group matching conditions. Again, all it will return is a group object, or I can pick a list of groups and it will return that list of groups. And I can also have it return a custom task. Generally, we don't need to use the custom task one anymore because of the existence of business values. Originally, the returns custom task would actually use, in almost every case, one of the fill fields or fill dropdowns custom task, or the SQL command custom task to return a specific SQL value. Generally, we don't have to do that anymore. Business values exist, so we can actually return values from a business value, which we're going to do in just a moment. So that is the basic configuration of a business value. It's a very simple tool to set up, but how you use business values can get fairly complex. So let's take a look at our business rules application, and that's where we're going to spend the remainder of our time today, implementing all of these business rules. So let's take a look at our form and let's actually run it. And let's just keep it running in the background and let's talk about what we're going to do. So I have a form that is going to, based on what I select, implement or guide the implementation of several business rules. In some cases, it sets a value on the form. In other cases, it either decides whether a timeline activity is going to run, or it decides who is going to participate in a timeline activity. So we're going to be using it for a whole bunch of different configurations. So let's just start from the top to the bottom and let's work through what we're going to expect to happen whenever we submit this form. Well, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and submit the form and we'll just set some values. So thing to do, I've got three options: this, that, and all the things. I'm going to pick this to do and then include these folks. And I'm just going to select finance as these folks that I'm going to pick. Where are you at? I am in California, so I'm going to pick California. And this checkbox is checked. It's been checked because a business rule has already been evaluated to set the value of this checkbox. So we're going to need to check out that business rule as well. And this one, not form dependent. I have a parameter here. Right now it says hi, and the business value result there says, well, hello yourself. So I'm just going to type in bye, and it will say bye-bye now. And then I'm just going to type in gibberish, and it's going to say what? And then I am just going to clear my field, and it will now say no data. That's the business rule, that parameterized business rule that we looked at before. What is obviously happening is it is taking a parameter from this specific form field. And when I change the value of that form field, it is changing the value of this. Well, in this case, it's just a system variable that calls the rule. So I'm going to submit. And I just want to pay particular attention to what is going on in our process. So I'm going to hit submit here. And the first thing that's going to happen is we're running an activity called training. And the reason we're running this activity called training is because I'm submitting it as myself, and I am in the training group. It even says that right there. You're in the training group. And there is a business rule that sets that as well. And because I am in the training group, I'm going to run in this training activity. If I wasn't in the training group, this activity wouldn't run. But I'm going to go ahead and complete this task. And now I am in a task called state. Well, we can actually see the activity name right up here at the very top. This activity is state. And I am running in the activity, and there is a business rule that decides, based on what state I have selected, who gets assigned this task. I picked California because it would assign me that task. I'll complete this again, and now I'm in a task that is called this task. And remember, up here, I had the choice of this, that, and all the things. I selected this, and so now this task is running. Now, there is another task called that task. Will it run? Let's complete this task. No, it will not run. In fact, if we go over to our user profile, I have a task running, but because I picked finance, and apparently I have taken myself out of the finance group, only Barb Stanley is assigned this task because this task is assigned to finance. And I guess Barb Stanley is the only person in the finance group. So Barb is going to have to do that task. So let's quickly just impersonate Barb real quick. And when we do, Barb has a task assigned to her. Actually, Barb has a couple of tasks assigned to her that are still running. So I'm going to end that task. And these are old tasks, but we'll end those. And then here's the task that is currently the one that we're interested in that's still running. And we can see that this is the other folks' task. Barb can now do this task. That task is done. We can stop pretending to be Barb. And now the webinar form is back to me. And so Barb completed her task, impersonated by me, obviously. And now I'm in a task called Type 1 User. Type 1 User is a made-up thing that I came up with, but I have a business rule that extracts that from a business value, and it returns my user type, which is 1. And so since I am a type 1 user, I have a task that is assigned to me. So keep in mind, this is all being controlled by the use of business rules. So having run through that once, just to see what happens when we run it, I should probably add myself to the finance group. Oh, never mind. I'll pick a different group the next time, and we'll hold our fingers crossed that I'm assigned to that group. Probably should have checked the group assignments yesterday, huh? And in any event, we'll go back to business rules, go back into our business rules application. And we're just going to run the form largely so that it can guide me step by step through what business rules we want to talk about in some sort of logical fashion. So let me make that just a little smaller, get it off to the, well, it has to be big enough that I can push it off to the side of the screen so that I can click on it. Actually, maybe I should just move it down there. And that way it'll always be below the screen and I can click on it down there. So here is our business rules form. And let's take a look at what we're doing to make all of this work. So let's start off with our form definition first. And we'll go into the design view here, and we will compare and contrast our running form with our form in design. The first 3 fields are just the standard fields that we put on every form: submitter, submission date, and request number. I'm actually going to need this submitter, however. This is kind of important for the way that my rules are going to work. All of them obviously have a default set in their field properties to the form submit user, the form submit date, and in this case, a request number as well. But again, it's just a string. The actual request number will be created on submission. So right here is the first of our business rules that we have set up. Now, this is just a label control, and I have set it to a default value. Now, I probably would not do this with a label control in the real world. I would probably do this now with a input control that I would just have, disabled and show disabled fields as text. However, I have a business rule for this: set user text. And so that is the text that is showing up right here. You're in the training group. So let's go take a look at that business rule. So the set user text business rule is associated with the webinar form. I do this for convenience because I'm going to be dealing solely in form items, and so it's more convenient for me in my condition to just be able to access the form fields from that particular form. So I have all of my form fields available. Now, this is not actually using that in this particular case. I'm going to have to cancel because what I'm actually pulling is current user here. And it's just testing the current user. And now I know why I took myself out of the finance group and the clerks group because I only want to be in the training group because I want to be able to show different users at different places. I am in training. So it is going to test the current user and it's going to check the training group on this server to see if I am a member of that group. So current user in is the operator, and I've selected group and the training group for that group. And similarly, I've done the same for finance and clerks. And if I am not in any group at all, I have a final fallback. Let's keep that word final fallback in mind. Anytime that you're going to return a first value matching condition, you generally want, this is a rule of thumb, it's not a universal rule, it's kind of a rule of thumb to keep in mind. You're generally going to want a final fallback. So I didn't create a condition for my fourth value. Now, in this case, it returns only the first value that matches. But let's say that I submitted this form and I am not in the training, finance, or clerks group. Well, then what's going to happen? I presumably want to show the user something. The user is not in one of those three groups. Now, if they are in one of those three groups, I know what they're doing and I can tell, just as I did on the form, you're in the training group. So I know that I am a training user. And so if I have current user in training, it will return you're in the training group. But what if I'm not one of these groups? Well, I need to have a final that at least says, I don't know what group you're in. I don't know who, I know who you are, but you don't match one of these groups. So I'm going to need to return some catch-all value. Now that I have examined this for a little bit, I don't actually need this form to be associated with a business rule. I don't need to have this associated with the webinar form. I'm not sure what I initially set this up to do or why I initially created this setup with the webinar form, but in point of fact, I don't need that property set because all I am testing is the current user system variable. That's a global system variable. No matter where I am in Process Director, it knows who I am. So therefore, I don't need to have any reference to the form. And so I clicked the wrong tab. Oh, well, fine. As you can see, it's used in the webinar form. It has an object link. Yay. Object links, I guess, is important. We do get questions about this. So I guess clicking on this is kind of serendipitous. If you want to know what object is using a business rule or most other objects as well, you can go to the Object Links tab and it will just show you everywhere that that object is referenced. In this case, the object is referenced in the webinar form. And so therefore, it has an object link, so I can actually go and see the properties of the webinar form, which will open up simply directly from that link. Because I don't actually need the webinar form in this context, I could technically go with no selection here because I'm not using any form-specific items. And because it's using for the conditions only the current user system variable, which is, again, global to the system, This just became a global business rule. I'm just going to hit OK and save it that way. So this would be a business rule that rather than storing with my application normally, I would store it in my business rules folder up here at the root of the system. The reason why I would put it in the root of the partition is because once I have my global business rules there, just like business values or custom tasks or data sources, if it's in the same location on both, say, my staging or dev and production servers, then when I import objects, it will always just look into that folder to see if the object is there. And if it is, it'll automatically make the appropriate associations with that global object if I reference it anywhere in my application. So rather than storing this particular business rule here, it's still going to remain stored here because, well, I have to be able to export it. I would normally place it here in business rules. And so I'm going to turn off my system folders because that's the last time we're going to mention that. But I can go back over here into the business rules application, and it says you're in the training group. But remember, this was created whenever I first did the association. What happens if I run it again now that I've made it a global business rule? Well, not much. It still says you're in the training group, which is pretty much what I want it to say. So I guess my rule still works, even though I removed that association. Of course, that association wasn't necessary, so I got rid of it. So that's how that business rule works. It just tests me as the current user and then returns the appropriate text value. The second business rule is returned from a business value. In fact, let's go to our form definition in Design View. Let's take a look at that configuration. So I have a system variable control, and just so that we can see, because this text is awful small, let me pop open Visual Studio Code so we can paste it in and see it a bit more legibly. All right, so there's Visual Studio Code. Don't need that CSS style sheet there. So we'll go to a new text file. Let's paste that in here. So I am, again, using a business rule system variable. And that business rule system variable is called BV business rule. Now, because I am using a system variable to return the rule value, I always have the pre and post formatters. And so hence I put in a pre-formatter of user type : I probably should have added a space there. Clearly I didn't because it says user type : 1. That is the actual value that the system variable is returning. Actually, the value the system variable is returning is actually just that, just the value 1. So it's BV business rule. Let's go take a look at that. And that is number 3. You know what? We should look at number 1 simply because that's kind of a generic one. Business rule 1 is the simple way of setting up a business rule. It just returns the result of a condition. And the condition it is checking is whether current user is in the group training. That's all it does. And so if I am in the training group, this will return true. And so that's all that this business rule does. This is sort of the basic version of a business rule. And that business rule, I forget exactly what it does on the form. Oh, I don't think it does anything on the form. I think this is set up for the process timeline. This user is in training. So I think that works on the process timeline. So we'll probably discuss it, or at least we'll see it in use in a little bit. For now, let's go back to this BV business rule that we were using. Okay, so here I do have a little bit of a problem. I'm I for this business rule, I do need to read directly off of the form. I I need to read a form value that's associated with the running form instance. So I am going to do my form association here. So this becomes a local business rule. The reason is because I am actually pulling the form submit user. So even though I'm not actually pulling a form field in this case, I still need the association because I just want to be able to read off of the current form instance of the webinar form. I want to be able to read the form submit user just for that webinar form. This is the only place that I'm going to use it. And so therefore, I'm just going to go ahead and do the association with the form. And I know it's always going to return the form submit user. And I'm using that as a parameter. And this is a parameter that is getting passed to a business value. And what I'm actually returning is the value of the business value, whatever it returns. But I do have this parameter clearly called user. And to fill that parameter, I'm using my form instance data, in this case, the form submit user system variable. All right, well, it's a business value. I guess we got to look at it. So let's go into my data folder. So there is an Excel file from whence my data comes. So we'll just grab this and open it real quick in Excel so that we can just see the base data. There's not much base data. It uses the user ID of the user. I've got simple user IDs on the server: Dale, Diana, Eric, Barb, Rick. And I have selected a user type for those users. So basically it's me and the most common test users that I always use when demoing something. And every user is either a type 1 or a type 2 user. So Diana and Barb are both type 2 users. Everybody else is a type 1 user. What is a type 1 or type 2 user? I don't know. I'm just making this stuff up as I go along, as Indiana Jones famously said. But I now have data that I can query, and that's the entire point of what we want to do. So I've obviously got my data source that connects me to this users table that gets created when the Excel sheet gets imported. And based on that data source, I have my system variable, or I'm sorry, my business value. And for this business value, it is parameterized. So we saw that there was a parameter called user previously, and there is that parameter. And this business value is pretty simple. It uses the Excel webinar users table, which has a user ID and a user type. And I am just going to select the user type from Excel webinar users, where user ID equals my parameter. And so my parameter is the user ID: Dale, Diana, Eric, Rick, Barb. And based on that, it is going to pass back my user ID. That, by the way, brings up something important in the business value itself. So basically, it's only going to return one user because user IDs are, or at least should be, unique. So when I test this query, it will return one record, and that record is my record, and I am user type 1. Cool. Something to keep in mind, though, because we're going to be using the business rule in this way, is that when I set up my parameter, form submit user, form submitter, basically a user picker, any user system variable, is going to return as the actual value the user UID, the GUID that uniquely identifies the user. That really is the unique ID that gets assigned to every object. It's some sort of GUID. It gets assigned to every object in the database, including any user object. And so it always wants to return the GUID. Now, I don't know what anybody's GUID is. So in this case, I've added the user ID formatter specifically so that rather than turning the varchar 36 bit character value for my GUID, it's actually going to return the user ID, which is my sort of human user ID, Dale, Barb, Diana. So I have to specify that to make this work with the data that I have because I used usernames and not GUIDs. This can be a little dangerous in that we don't enforce uniqueness on the user ID. So there could technically be two Dales on this system. That is not a recommended practice, but it does happen because there are occasions like when two organizations group or one organization acquires another, they merge. Merge is the word I was looking for, not group. When two organizations merge, it's not uncommon when they want to merge those two organizations to keep their AD separate, their Active Directory or whatever LDAP directory they're using. But they might have the same usernames. For example, if you have very common, especially for smaller organizations, to assign usernames like John Smith would be Smith J. Well, John Smith is not a super unusual name. And if I have two organizations that are merging and I'm going to want to pull two different organizations in and they both have a John Smith and they're both Smith J, I'm going to have two of the same user IDs. That's not ideal, but it's not a deal breaker because those two users are actually separate users because they have different GUIDs. It is problematic for logging in. So depending on how they log in, if I have a Windows user called Smith J, I can also have a built-in user called Smith J. And those are not the same users if I am using like NTLM Windows single sign-on to log in to Process Director. Or I'm using some sort of SAML system. I think probably most of you are using SAML rather than Windows directly. Same thing applies. If I have a SAML user whose username is Smith J, I can have a Smith J as a built-in user. They might, in fact, be the same person, but one of them logs in through SAML and is identified as a SAML user, while the other one is a built-in user, and I would have to go to the normal Process Director login screen, bypass SAML, and then log into the system directly as that built-in user. And that'll work fine, except in a case like this, where I am using the user ID, pulling it from a separate database in this case, that might get confusing because I actually have two Smith J's. One built in, one SAML or Windows, whatever. Well, I could have three, one SAML, one Windows, and one built in. The possibilities are endless, but we don't enforce uniqueness on user IDs. So you got to be careful around how you do this. Now, in my case, I've only got, 10 users on the system, so it doesn't matter. I know who they all are. And largely they're non-existent people, so I don't worry about them logging in. So I don't care much about user ID. But if you are in a setup where your user IDs are not unique, now I know factually that I don't think it applies to any of you because of the way that you're creating your accounts and you're doing your logins. But if you ever find yourself with two people with the same user ID or the same person with two different types of account, but that have the same user ID, then you're not going to be able to use the user ID 100% reliably to identify them in a system variable like this. And anything that you can't do with 100% reliability, you shouldn't do. So in that case, you would probably remove this formatter. Now, what that implies, and we've had to go over this with a couple of customers and help them set that up. What that implies then, if I really need a unique value for the user and it's not going to be my user ID, then I would have to get rid of this formatter. And yet at the same time, in my data that I have in my SQL or Oracle database that is separate from Process Director, I'm going to need to have that user's GUID in as the user ID in my external data, because in that case, rather than passing the user ID, which I did in my case for simplicity, which would be what you would, if you were like me and you were lazy, you'd always go for the simple option. That option's not going to be available to you if your user IDs are not absolutely guaranteed to be unique. So in that case, you'd have to delete that formatter, and whatever the user UID for that user, whatever their GUID is, you would have to use in your external data so that you could return user-specific data by the GUID. So when you're dealing with external data like that, that's something to keep in mind if you're dealing with users. Now, I know most of you, or a lot of you at least, are using email addresses as the user ID. If you're doing that, you're pretty safe because email addresses have to be unique on your system. That means that your user ID values are going to be unique as well. So you could still use it in that case, but just something to keep in mind. It is one of those weird little wrinkles that we have to think about. Okay, so let's go back and move to our next business value on the form, and that is the thing to do. Now, I have three options: this, that, and all the things. So how does that work? Well, to understand, we have to go now to our webinar timeline, and I have I have three tasks. I have this task, that task, and the other task. And all of these tasks have a needed when activity. And what they are looking at is the activities to run business rule. The activities to run business rule is evaluated based on the thing to do drop down on the form. Now, before I walk through how this works, let me just explain at the outset, this is completely unnecessary. I'm doing this as an example of how a business rule can be used in this particular case to either run conditional execution in a process timeline, or, as we'll see in a minute, to do user assignment in a process timeline. But I'm actually using business values when I don't have to. Because this process timeline, and the business value is number 6, activities to run, which we'll look at, but that business value is actually looking at a form field value. I don't technically need to jump through the business value hoop here because I already know what the form for the timeline is. So for any of these tasks that are being assigned by business rule that I'm using here, these business rules are unnecessary. Technically, rather than going here and picking activities to run, I'll add an additional condition here that I will not save, but hopefully it won't save it all. And if it does, it won't matter. I have access to a form field. I have access to the form field that specifies the value of who does what. So I can just pick that form field directly in my process timeline, and I don't need to have the extra overhead of a business value. So just keep in mind that I'm doing this via business value, but I'm doing it just as a way of showing capability. And you should know that in this particular instance, as an implementation rule, I would not do this via a business value. With that being said, we are going to use that business value and we're going to go through that extra complication. So the business value is, or sorry, I keep saying business value. The business rule is number 6, activities to run. So let's look at it. Leave. I don't want to make any changes at all. So activities to run is a first value matching condition business rule. Now, just so that you know, this is a local business rule because I have set it to the webinar form. So that makes my condition setting a little easier because I can just use the thing form field for the thing to do. So I can just assign that form field. And then if thing equals this, then it will return 1. If it equals that, it will return 2. And if it equals all the things, it will return 3. So if we now, knowing that we will return either 1, 2, or 3, so thing is 1, or this is 1, that is 2, and all the things is 3, now we can go back and look at our process timeline, see how it works. So we'll go with this task. And for this task, if activities to run equals 1, or activities, I might as well open this up, activities to run equals 1, or it equals 3, it is going to run the this task. Obviously, the that task is going to have something similar, but in this case, we are looking for activities to run equaling 2 or 3 instead of 1 or 3. And then finally, all tasks is just looking for activities to run equals 3. So if I choose this, only the this task will run. That task will not run because I've selected 1, remember, and my only other 2 values are 2 or 3, so that task won't run. All tasks won't run because I didn't select all tasks. I only selected 1, and all tasks is looking for a value of only 3. So if I pick this, only the this task will run. If I pick that, only the that task activity will run. But if I pick 3, this, that, and all tasks will all run based on the value returned from my business rule. And so with that, I can set up conditional execution where there are 3 different possible execution paths that can be run for this specific, for each instance of the process timeline, and they're all based on whether I picked this, that, or all the things. So the all tasks activity will only run if I pick all the things. But if I pick all the things, all 3 tasks will run. If I pick this or that, only 1 of these 3 tasks will run. So I can control the execution of my process timeline via that business value. Then there is the include these folks dropdown. And I have 3 values: training, finance, and all. And that runs its own business value on the form, although I have to go, it doesn't run it on the form, it runs it on the timeline. I have to go here and I have to look at participants. So for participants, it's going to be looking at business rule number 7, set groups. So let's look at that business rule, because this business rule now returns a list of groups. So note, as we're going through these business rules, we're each doing something different here with the return type. We've done lists of values. We've done, did we do lists of users yet? Oh, not yet. We haven't gotten to that part yet. We will. In this case, it's a list of groups. So once again, this is associated with the form itself. I'm looking at a form field, the include form field, and I'm looking for whether it says either training or all. So if it says training or all, it will assign the training group, or it will return the training group. And if it includes finance or all, it will return the finance group. Obviously, if you put in all, it will return both the training and the finance group members, and they will all be assigned to the task because in the process timeline itself, that is what does the task assignment for this particular activity, is that business rule. So this business rule now will return either the training or the other group, which I have already forgotten, or return both groups, depending on what the value of my form field is to determine who does what in each of these individual tasks. Where are you at? So I have California, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico as possible values for the where you at. And in my process timeline, I have the state activity. And in the state activity, I am looking at the state user selector. So let's take a look at it. The state user selector business rule is going to evaluate my location field. And based on that location, it is going to return the first user matching condition. So I only have 4 choices, so it will never return more than one user. And so based on the state I'm in, it's going to return a different user. It's going to return either me, Diana, Barb, or Rick. And so I selected California because the location was California. It selected me. Once again, this is a local business rule, but it doesn't have to be. Put a pin in that because we're going to come back to this business rule because this is a business rule that you might want to use in multiple contexts. And I'll explain that in a little bit. Just keep that in mind. In any event, the state user selector is real simple. And so based on what I select here, it is going to return the appropriate user for the state selected. So we're cool with that. So now we have our training section request checkbox. And it says this is a request from a training section user, and it is checked. I am in the training group. We figured that out right up here at the top. So this obviously should be checked. So let's go back to the form. And in this case, I think we can just go to form fields and go to training. And in this case, I'm setting it in the field properties of this training checkbox form field, and I'm setting the default value. So I am just going into the business rules and BR training and the I forget which one it was. User is in training. That's the one it was. User is in training. That is the one that returns just true or false. So Wow, I am just losing track of where my mouse is. So BR training, that's it. So user is in training. Now we looked at that just a second ago, and as we saw, that just returns a true or false value. And so I can actually set, because this is a checkbox, I can actually set the default value of a checkbox directly to a business rule as long as that business rule returns just a true or false value. So as we saw a minute ago, we can close this down here and go back to our user is in training business rule. So as we saw, this is just returning the result of a condition, and it's just checking whether the current user is in the training group. Because we are doing a check of a global system variable, current user, and groups are global too, current user is in training, this does not need to be a local business rule. I think what I did is I copied and pasted these business rules and then reconfigured them. This is actually a global business rule. It does not need to be associated specifically with this form because it doesn't do any form or timeline-based stuff at all. All it does is check your, whether you're in the training group as the current user, and it returns true or false based on that. Because it returns true or false, though, any business rule that returns true or false can obviously be used as the value for a checkbox. I did kind of hide it in the webinar form by setting it on the, where is it? Checkbox. There it is. Wow. I did set it as the default value. So that means that as soon as the form is created, on form creation for the very first instance of a new, or the very first time the new form instance is generated, it will set the value for this field. And because it's a checkbox, I don't have to do any formatting or anything like that. I can just directly apply the true or false value that gets returned by the business value as the value of the checkbox, and that checkbox value gets set. And that takes us to our parameterized business value. Now, we looked at it once, I think, to see how it works. And once again, I have 4 possible values that an input control can contain. 2 values of which I'm looking for, for specifics. I'm only caring about high and by. But however many values, so the reason why I'm looking for 4 values for this particular business rule is because I have 2 values that I care about, but I also have 2 other possible values. Again, this is one of those general thumbnail rules. If you're going to be basing something on a text value, especially a text box, where you have no control over what the user is going to enter, then you need to always account for 2 things. What happens if they don't enter anything? What happens if the box is just blank? And what happens if they enter gibberish? And for this example, gibberish means any value that does not match a value that I want to evaluate, right? So I have 2 values I want to evaluate, high and by. I don't care about anything else other than that. In my use case, in this use case, high and by are the only 2 valid values. Everything else is either blank or gibberish in this use case. So I have 2 values that I want, so I've got a test for those, but I always need to go back then, especially for, just ad hoc user input, I need to account for the gibberish use case and the blank use case so that I know what values need to get returned for that. It's not a disaster if you forget to do that. So if I leave out these last 2 conditions, okay, it's not it's not great, but it's not terrible. I mean, the worst thing that is going to happen is that none of my conditions will be true and my business value will return nothing. And there are use cases where having the business value just not return anything might be what you want. But in any use case where I've got to have something returned because I'm going to use whatever value gets returned to maybe run a set form data or perform another action or call a business value later on, that means I need a value. And so I have to control what the end result of the business rules return is. So if it doesn't make any difference if the business rule returns anything and you don't care, okay, fine, then you can probably leave these two off. But in many cases, you do care because you're going to be using this as a parameter in some way. You can't have a blank because if you try to run a business value with a blank parameter, depending on how you've constructed the business value, and depending on how the SQL works, it will either return all the things or it will return none of the things, depending on how your SQL is set up. Both of those options are probably not what you want. So I need to control for a blank value. I need to be able to pass if I'm going to be using this, whatever value gets returned. If I'm going to be using that as a parameter later on in life, then I've got to pretty much control those values. So that's why we would do this. And I just need to have my value parameter passed correctly to it. So in this case, I have this parameter, value contains high, value contains by, value contains whatever. Now, the way that I am extracting that parameter is not here. It's actually in text down here where I'm just returning the text because that's really all I'm doing in this specific case. So if we go look at the form instance itself, and we go into design view, then we can see that right here, this is a system variable control. Let's copy and paste what's in the system variable. So again, it's just a business rule system variable. The rule is 8 period webinar parameterized. Yesterday, I changed the name of webinar parameterized. It didn't have the 8 in front of it. And then I spent about 15 minutes wondering why this business value wasn't returning anything because originally it said webinar parameterized. And I kept looking at it and going, well, that's the business value. Why isn't, that's the business rule. Why isn't this system variable working? Well, I had changed the name to this. And therefore, the original value, well, that's not what I changed it to. That wouldn't work either. And that colon's not going to work. Sooner or later, we will get the exact text. And brother, do we need the exact text here? Most of the time in Process Director, when you're dealing in the UI, even though it shows you the name of a thing, field name, business rule name, business value name, that's for you to read. Process Director doesn't use that. Process Director always uses the GUID of the object to uniquely identify it. Basically, every time we show you the name of an object in the main UI itself, what we're really showing you is kind of like a drop-down. You're seeing the display text, which is text you understand. Process Director is seeing the value, which is the GUID that is the unique identifier for that object. However, system variables don't work that way. In system variables, the names are important. Same thing happens whenever you do imports, because GUIDs aren't transferable. Process director is going to look at the name. So for a system variable, this name has to match exactly the name of the business rule you're trying to invoke. So you've got rule there. So process director knows we're looking at a business rule. So now process director is going to look for a value in, I think it's in table rule in the process director database. It's going to look for an entry whose name is that 8 period space webinar parameterized. That is the name. Once it finds that name, it will then extract the GUID and it will use that GUID for everything else. Something very similar happens, as I said, when you do imports. Because GUIDs don't import between systems, the only thing that process director has to go by is the type of object that it is, the object's name, and its relative file path. And so if the object is new, then the relative file path doesn't matter. It just creates a new object. Nothing matters. It just has a name. It has an object type. We need to create a new object type of this type of object with this name. And when we create the object, it'll get a GUID. Now we can uniquely identify that object. If it's a related object, again, it looks for, like if we're looking for something in the business rules folder at the root of our partition, it's going to look in the business rules folder in the root of the partition for the objects it contains, and it's going to try to match the name. Once it matches the name, it can then pull the GUID. But object imports and system variable syntax are the two times where we don't know what the GUID is until we do some name matching, some text string matching. So of course, once I renamed this properly, after 15 minutes of confusion, everything started to work. Now, because this is a parameterized system variable, I do need to have some extra syntax here. I need to set the value parameter so that it returns the appropriate value from the business rule, because this is a parameterized business rule. So anytime I'm passing a parameter, I am going to use my encoding string right there to ensure that it only passes safely encoded string data back to my query, because in this case, a parameterized business rule is a query of a type. So I really do need that $sign value. And if you leave the $sign out, it's not going to work, because that's how we've set it up. If you're going to do a parameter, what identifies it as a parameter is this safe encoding string here to encode value to equal, and then I have a form field called param, and it's just going to pass the value of param to my rule, and rule will read that value, and that value will either be hi, by, gibberish, or blank, and then it will return one of the appropriate 4 values. So that this specific syntax with the value equals, whatever that is mandatory for business rules that are parameterized. Now, a minute ago, we were looking at the state thing, and I said, stick a pin in that. We're going to have to come back and look at this. I did this as a local business rule associated with the webinar form. Now, for demo purposes, that's fine. In the real world, this might have a much broader application. For example, let's say that you have an organization that has an account representative for a different state, which is basically what we're doing here. So I'm in charge of California, Diana's in charge of Arizona, and so forth. There might be a lot of different processes where I need to figure out, if my customer is in California, Arizona, etc., who needs to handle this with the customer? What account manager do I need to assign a task to? I might need to use that all over the place. Since that is so, having a business rule like this that just looks at this form is highly inefficient, because to replicate this, I would just have to create the same business rule, copy and paste it somewhere else, and then change my form association to whatever form I want it associated with. This is a great case for a global system variable, or I'm sorry, a global business rule. So if I go into my business rule, and let's go back to parameterized master, because I think that's the one. Nope. Which one was it? Was it department text, training user? I had one I thought up here. This is it. This is conditional assignment. It's called conditional assignment. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. What I've done here, though, is I've parameterized it. I have a parameter called state. Well, it's supposed to be a parameter called state. So I have a parameter called state. And so I would need to pass this state parameter to this business rule, and it would return the appropriate user. So, and I only did one example of it here because there's no reason to dwell on it too much. But now I can simply pass California CA, that was the value. I can simply pass that as a parameter to this business rule, just as we just saw. In this case, the parameter would be state. So I would have state equals whatever the form field system variable is. Actually, it would be $ state equals whatever the form field is. And then I could pass that form field value here. I pass it California, and it's going to return Dale Franks, just as the state user selector business variable or business rule that we looked at just did. But in this case, it is now a universal business rule, which I can call from anywhere. The only trouble with parameterized business rules is that they don't work like business values do. So if we go back to our BV business rule down here, you can see when I set the value to return, and I picked a business value that had a parameter on it, it gave me the user parameter. And now I have to tell it what the user parameter is, either a form field or some other system variable, or in this case, just a string that I have set to, the system variable for form submit user. All that's well and good, but business rules don't do that. So if I try to pick a business rule out of the UI, so yeah, what did I have this set to? Conditional assignment. I got to know how to find it. Nothing, no group and value picker. So we'll call it conditional assignment for now. I really do need to go in and organize all my business values, but I haven't. So now it's a problem. Let me go back here to just a generic condition builder here on my form. We'll open up the condition builder, and we'll go in and we will pick business rules and conditional assignment. We'll just grab our conditional assignment business rule and we'll hit OK. There's no parameter there. I cannot pass that parameter via the UI. So that means that anytime I want to address a parameterized system or a parameterized business rule, I pretty much, I guess I closed out text editor here. So anytime that I want to do a parameterized business rule, I can only access it via the system variable. So if I wanted to take my, my state user selector, which is now called conditional assignment, and the parameter is called state. The only way that I could call that would be to call rule conditional spelling, very important, conditional assignment. My parameter is state. And then it might be a form field or say customer state is my form field. I need to assign the appropriate account manager for whatever state my customer is in. So I've got a form field called customer state, and that is what is going to be used to pass the state parameter to the conditional assignment business rule. So what that means is that I can't just go into my condition builder and pick the business rule itself. I'm going to have to use the system variable, which means that if I want to use it in a condition anywhere, I'm going to have to go to value, string, and then I'm going to need to just copy or type my business variable in there, my system variable in there. And now I can match that whatever it returns. We'll just say, well, it's going to return a string. So I don't have a user picker on this form, I don't think, but let's pretend I do. Let's say user label. Let's pretend that user label is a user picker. So in this case, this is how I would have to do that. I'd need to put that rule and then say if that rule equals, current user or whatever it is, I can set that. I mean, this will return a user, so it needs to be assigned to some sort of user type field or user type value for selection. Well, I could do this. I could stringify both sides of my equation. So, I lost it. Well, I could set the system variable on both sides in that particular case. So that's just something to keep in mind. Once you get to a parameterized business rule, you have to use the system variable syntax. I have asked that they change that via a Jira ticket. I asked that quite a while ago, and they never got around to doing it. It may be worthwhile discussing that again, because ideally, if I have a parameter set to a business rule, it would be cool if I could just pick it out of the choose system variable dialog box and get that parameter value returned back to me. It doesn't seem like that big of an ask. And yet they have always found something a little more important to do. And perhaps you have something more important to do at this point in the morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. So I'm going to let you get to it. Have a great day, a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. So long.